I just had, since I'm paying for the microphone, I just had a couple of questions before we open it up to the audience. For Leo, why very few of the fired Disney people have come out of the shadows? And I can see the ones who maybe got tech jobs in Orlando would want to keep their heads down. Right. But once they got their severance check and it cleared and it's in the bank, I would think more people would be willing to come out. And what I'm asking is, why did you decide to come out of the shadows?
Well, what's going on there is that there are fewer and fewer IT jobs out there every year. It's musical chairs. Every year there's fewer and fewer jobs. There's fewer chairs there. So everybody's jockeying for the jobs. There's a general consensus among IT folks that if you speak out, you're going to get blacklisted from the industry. It's a tight-knit community. So if you're willing to travel around the country, you're going to be more apt to speak out. But even in that case, you might not be. There are very few IT workers that are speaking out right now for that reason, because they don't want to have any kind of a negative mark on their resume for the next job. So that's one of the big reasons. Also, where I live, Orlando, Orlando's known as Disney Town. It's the most visited place on this planet. And Orlando is obviously the biggest employer there. So you have people that would like to get another job, and if the biggest employer there is Disney, naturally, they're not going to speak out. So those are a couple of reasons. Now, me personally, it wasn't until the point where I realized that I'm tired of dodging bullets within this industry. There are outsourcings, offshoring, onshoring. This is all going on, and it's not the opportunities within information technology are not there anymore. So at the point where I decided that I'm getting out of it entirely is when I felt comfortable that, you know what, more people need to know about this, and me as a citizen, I need to make sure that this doesn't happen to other Americans. That's why I'm here, and that's why I'm speaking out finally.
Thank you, Leo. Questions from the audience? We have a microphone, so if you could identify yourself, sir.
Good afternoon, Neil McCabe, One American News. I always sensed that there was some kind of connection between, the student debt. You have all of these people graduating who have been told that this degree is going to make them earn so much more money, but to pay off those debts, they need a higher salary to cover that, and so it's like it's almost like this meat grinder system where you get these people to borrow all this money. But then when it comes time to pay them to pay off this debt, then the system decides, no, we're actually not going to pay you what you need to pay off that debt. And it just seems like there are so many young Americans who don't seem to realize, that they're the ones getting jammed in this situation. Maybe if you could speak to that, maybe Michelle could speak to that.
John, you go first.
Or John, go ahead, please.
And then I'll follow up.
I'll say only half of Americans who graduate in technology fields are actually able to find a job in that. And I say our irony here is that Obama's now proposed new regulations to make it easier for foreign workers to get foreign graduates to get jobs. And one of the things I've noticed, it's just as an observer, no longer really searching for jobs in the industry, is that it's very hard, as Leo was describing, to find jobs. If I just go out and search for computer jobs in my area, they're not simply aren't posted anymore because the jobs are being routed through these largely foreign outsourcing companies and consulting shops. Go ahead.
I just have a sort of side note to that, because one of the things that we dug into, of course, was Bill Gates' role in all of this, in propagating that giant myth that there is an American tech worker shortage. And this just happened to overlap in a lot of concentric circles with another public policy issue that I have been doing a lot of reporting on, and that is Common Core. And it's very interesting because, of course, Common Core serves as a nice smokescreen, a nice vehicle to help perpetuate the American tech worker shortage myth, because, of course, the underlying premise of these whole Fed Ed academic standards is, well, we've got to raise them. It's an emergency. It's a crisis. We don't have enough trained young minds to fill these so-called STEM jobs. And so Common Core, which as so many of the independent educational experts who were in on the sausage making behind the scenes here in D.C. on these standards can testify, it does the opposite of raising standards. So what actually happens is that you've got Bill Gates pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into a program that helps him not only perpetuate the current myth that there's an American tech worker shortage, but if he succeeded, if he had succeeded without any kind of grassroots opposition in the Common Core scheme, would have actually helped manufacture a real crisis of undermining, particularly in math and science, standards that would basically produce inferior tech workers. So really just connecting the dots in all of the spending that Bill Gates does on both of those fronts is really important. And again, from a journalistic standpoint, you'd think it would be something that any kind of Bob Woodward and Bernstein inspired investigative journalists would do, but there are a few national journalists out there who have looked into the spending on that, but again, the dots are not connected between these two issues, and they're inextricably linked.
And if I could just add, it's ironic that we're now in the National Press Club in the Bloomberg room, and Michael Bloomberg and his Partnership for a New American Economy is one of the people, along with Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, who are funding a lot of this importation of servile tech labor from abroad.
And we profile NFAP and Bloomberg spending, and what we urge journalists to do is not just to take on face value these very patriotic-sounding front groups. Again, it takes a lot of time to digest. I mean, we went back and forth on trying to come up with a mainstream way to explain regression analysis. And I'm married to an econometrician, so we got a little bit of help on that. But you know, when you hear all these claims about the H-1B programming, for every H-1B there's going to be 3 or 4 or 10 or 100 miraculous new American jobs that are created, it takes more than 2 minutes of glancing at a press conference to understand how all of those numbers are, again, how the numbers are crunched and how the data is cooked. And we do try to explain that.
Yes, Neil?
Hi, Neil Monroe at Breitbart. So for what it's worth, I've been in the journalism business 25 years. I've covered a wide variety of subjects, including classified programs and science. This immigration area is the worst area for line and complexities that I've ever come across. This week I discovered, oh, wow, that's great, meaning a great new story. It's actually terrible. But my immediate question for you is, Leo, is why do American professionals not organize for their self-interest? In this country, lots of subgroups organize rallies and events at the drop of a hat. But you guys are being hammered. Your wages are flat. The industry guys are openly saying we want to replace you, and yet you don't do anything. What's up with that?
Well, it's not his fault, but if you have any thoughts, Leo, that would be.
Well, I wish I had a good answer. Unionizing or that sort of thing, just I don't think it's in the kind of DNA and the nature of IT people. Typically, they are independent types. They are maybe, in a sense, a little bit entrepreneurial in a way, and for those reasons, I don't know of anybody. I've had that same thought before. I thought, gosh, there's no way they could run this if we all just walked up today. If we all just together in one big pack just got up and walked out, there's no way that they would be able to do this. But I think another part of that is that financial reasons, people are really financially strapped, and a lot of people, unfortunately, are paycheck to paycheck, and so for that reason, they also wouldn't want to risk anything. So there's a lot of different reasons, I think, for that. But I haven't heard of one professional IT organization that would do such a thing. And there are unions at Disney in Orlando, but not any that would be IT related that I'm aware of.
John, do you have any thoughts on that since you organized the Programmers Guild?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised myself. I think the instinctive individuality is one reason, but the other reason I'll give is I don't think that programmers, like everyone else, are aware of the scope of the problem that's going on here. Because we have this talk like Disney. The industry lobbyists talk about this being an isolated incident. It's only isolated that it's made the press. That I've been following this over the years, and if you read Computer World, you'll be seeing that this is just going on continuously.
One idea I had, we'll get to your question in just a second, is specifically relating to this. I'm not trying to give Donald Trump any advice on how to spend his money, but it seems to me it would have been a PR coup to tell all the workers at Disney when they were fired, you'd have to find out right then, that he would cover their entire severance package if they all walked out the next day. If I had billions of dollars, that's something I'd definitely be doing, and I'd put the word out right there because it would have you don't have to do it a few times to get some real attention to people. But yes, next question.
Start with CNS News. Just following up on the workers' rights issue, because it seems like that's something that's not talked about. We're talking about the rights of the foreign workers, of the companies who want to hire the foreign workers, but what protections do the American workers have, and is that being addressed? And also, is it only in IT that this is happening, or are there other industries where foreign workers are being brought in to replace people? Thank you.
It's happening. I'm hoping I'm getting to get all your questions. There are a lot there. It's happening in a lot of different industries. If you look at H-1B, for example, it goes in everything. Even down to massage therapists and that kind of thing. But it's largely being used for computers, and I think that two reasons for that. And one is that it tends to be at the higher end of the individual contributor wage scale. Is the first thing, and also I think there's just a lot of mumbo jumbo that senior executives don't really understand it, and it's easy to make this. It's easy to make the sale to someone who doesn't understand computers. Oh, American programmer costs you $10 more an hour than Indian programmer. That's easier to explain than, oh yeah, but you're getting 1/10 the productivity. Why is that? They don't. It's easier to sell this in the computer industry.
I just had a quick question, I guess, for Michelle to kind of put this into context. How do you see the problem, the basic problem here? Is it that the rules are inadequate, or is it that we're just taking too many foreign workers overall? In other words, is it a numbers issue or just sort of a better management issue?
Well, I think it's both, and the question, the just the logistical question of the federal government's ability to process. And you just look at the overall picture of who we're letting in, who we've let in, who shouldn't be here, and what kind of triage should be done in terms of immigration enforcement. We have 1 million green card holders coming into the country every year. And there was an analysis put out, I think by Jeff Sessions' office, that by 2025 that's going to reach some 10 million. That's the population of 7 of the largest cities in the country. That's on top of all of the 11 to 30 million illegal aliens that we're always hearing about, and the priority of so many of the open borders politicians on both sides of the aisle seems to be on them when we have backlogs out the wazoo to process the applications of people who came in here legally. And then there's that false dichotomy in these debates and these political debates about, oh, I'm against illegal immigration, but I'm for legal immigration. And then you've got this whole big, huge, massive problem of the upwards of now, what is the H-1B stock? There's 650,000 H-1B workers currently in the country, along with the hundreds of thousands of F-1 students who are now converting through OPT And thanks to this, both Bush and Obama, with their own sort of executive administrative expansions of those programs, turning into another cheap foreign worker pipeline. And then on top of that, all of the seasonal guest workers that we bring in, agricultural and non-agricultural, and then all of the hundreds of thousands of J-1 visa holders who are all here. And then on top of that, as so many of us on this side of the aisle, in terms of fixing our immigration chaos, are always pointing out, we still have no entry-exit database system. So 40% of all of those people who are so-called in the shadows are here, 45% now, here as visa overstayers. So, yes, it's a numbers problem. Yes, it's an implementation problem. And it would seem to me that it is entirely reasonable and commonsensical to say, stop. Let's catch our breath. Let's take care of the problems that are already here. And yes, if it discomfits the people who came in here illegally to know that they might possibly, in some kind of new regime where enforcement is the first priority and putting American workers and citizens as the first priority, that yes, they might possibly, if they are unlucky after 20, 25, 30 years of being here not being caught, might possibly be caught up in some kind of net and asked to be sent home.
I would follow up that two things. Well, just something about the numbers is because reform of the H-1B program in lobbyist speak means more visas without doing any reform.
Yes.
And because all these bills that whenever you hear H-1B reform, the bills they're talking about don't reform the program other than to make it bigger. But one of the things that we talk is the skill level. I mentioned that the prevailing wage system, under the H-1B program, there's a skill-based prevailing wage system where employers can classify the employer's prevailing wage they have to pay is based upon the skill that they classify the worker at. Okay, the employers classify half the workers at the lowest skill level, which commands a wage at the 17th percentile. Okay, if you move up to add the second classification, which commands a wage at the 34th percentile, still way below average, that's 82% of all H-1B workers. Okay? If you then add the average in, average, you're up to 94%. Okay? So only 6% of the H-1B workers, according to their employers, command a salary that's above average, and only 18% command a salary that's average. So if we just restricted the H-1B program to people who command an average skilled workers, we wouldn't be coming close to reaching the quota.
Yep, good, thanks. Another question? Yes, sir.
Cliff Kincaid here with Accuracy in Media. I have a two-part question. The first one for John and Leo. My youngest son's a junior in high school. He's president of the computer club. He loves IT, plays Halo, Madden, all this. He thinks there's plenty of jobs out there, and he's just going to make big bucks when he gets out of high school and then goes through college. What do I say to him? What do I tell him? The second question is for Michelle. You've always been outspoken. You've hinted earlier about the disappointment with your friends at Fox Business, no follow-up during the debate on this particular issue. You're a Fox News contributor. What do you say to the Fox News people who are in Rupert Murdoch's hip pocket? Have you been booked on Hannity, O'Reilly? You've been booked to talk about your new book?
I'll let them answer first, and then I'll answer.
Well, yours is easy.
Well, that's a tough question. I personally, I don't recommend it to new students. If you have a passion for it and you love it, I'm always the person that says go after it and do it. But the fact of the matter is, out of this book, is that half of new IT hires are foreign guest workers. So if you consider that fact, there's a 50-50 chance that job's going to go to you or to a foreign worker. That is a tough ratio to follow up on. I mean, any other field, you're probably not going to run into that situation. So I hope that maybe your son has some other passions and things that he loves.
Yeah,
but me personally,
maybe.
I don't recommend it.
Maybe you can go into farm work. There might be fewer immigrants in there anyway.
Well, maybe the other use your have him use his math skills on to work on Wall Street. Moving money around. Then
my daughter's in engineering school up at Rensselaer. And I suggest your son go to stopoverreach.com and make a comment on the government regs for that three-year extension on OPT, and that might help a little bit.
Second mention.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I was a Fox News contributor for 13 years, and I still have cordial relations with a lot of my former colleagues, and I've been on Fox all week. I'll be going on tonight again, and we're actually trying to take it to every media forum or public forum that we can. I was on CNN for the first time last night, and there was no blood drawn. But we're very clear about our distress with a lot of the Silicon Valley CEOs, big tech companies, and media moguls. We already mentioned Michael Bloomberg, and there are many references to Rupert Murdoch in the book. And I think that there's room for disagreement among friends. The New York Post ran a huge excerpt of the introduction of our book last Sunday before our official launch, and I appreciate all of that. What I will say, though, is that I think it's a disgrace that there are many not only fine journalists, but also fine public policy researchers and other individuals who take the same positions that we do, or other supposedly controversial or unorthodox positions in favor of American workers and American citizens in immigration policy, who have been blacklisted and blackballed and relegated to the margins somehow. And I think it's of a piece. I think it's a little bit poetic, and the timing again is interesting as well. That at the same time that we're coming out with this book and saying that the things that we're saying, that you have this chaos on free speech squelching college campuses with the tolerance mob and the diversity mob who act as enforcers of the limits of what any debate should be, whether it's on immigration or race or anything else. And to the extent that I can use the platform that I've built over these last couple of decades in both old and new media to help make sure that we're in the mainstream and that the real radicals are pushed to the margins, and that it becomes a safe space for journalists to be able to ask these questions and provide dissenting viewpoints and tell the stories of these American workers without them having to become victims twice. We were talking about why is it that more of these fired workers don't come out of the woodworks. Well, geez, look at the witch hunts. Look at the dumpster diving that goes on. From my perspective, of anyone who's on my side of the political aisle who voluntarily chooses to become a public figure. If I were a tech worker who were fired, I would not want to have to go through that kind of national security level style clearance and questioning and vetting, let alone subject my family to it.
And I don't.
Sorry, Leo.
And I would say at this point, I don't expect ABC News to be covering this book with the Disney story.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go. We have a couple more questions. Yes. No. Okay. And then after them, here, Francis, right there.
Hello, I'm Francis Sisson. I work with the office of Senator Grassley, chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And I just wanted to, it's more of a comment than a question. Legislation was dropped on Tuesday that addresses this whole nightmare. Senator Grassley and Senator Durbin have been fighting for years on this subject, and we have introduced a bill. I think the number is S2266. It finally got a number. And it reproduces many of the elements of prior bills that Senators Grassley and Durbin introduced on this subject. And it adds many new ones as well, principally provisions that address the replacement of U.S. workers, that is interdict. We address numerous other elements of monkey business and shenanigans in this program that we think ought to stop. The primary reform of the bill is it requires the employers to hire an American first if there's an American who's available and eligible to do the job. That is the starting point of the whole legislation. Everything else that follows is extra. Anyway, I just wanted to say that it's S2266, and thank you to all the panel for coming and spreading the word on this important message.
Thank you.
Thank you to Senator Grassley from our heart, bottom of our heart.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm David North. I work for the Center for Immigration Studies, and Mark does not know what I'm about to say. One of the things that one can do, and I have done on a very small scale, vis-a-vis the Disney thing, is to simply sell the stock short and hope you make some money on it.
Next question in the back.
I'm Paul Donnelly. It turns out I'm in the book. I am a crap weasel, evidently.
Yes, you are.
Is he in
For Neil,
Is he in the book?
yes.
Oh, okay.
For Neil, I represent the largest organization of tech workers in America. For Michelle, when you mentioned illegal immigration and when you mentioned the check-in, check-out system, I was the communications director of the Jordan Commission, which proposed both of those. So this isn't quite as simple as people think, and yet it is actually much simpler. The H-1B program does exactly two things, and only two things. It subsidizes outsourcers, and it delays green cards. That's it. The IEEE USA, which is the largest organization of tech workers in the country, wants green cards, not guest worker visas. But in every one of the legislative debates that has been mentioned here, I was part of it. I was in the room when they did the 1996 Act. I helped in a very small way to pass the 1990 Act, which created the structure of the H-1B. What I'd like to hear the panel address is how you guys, the restrictionist side of the equation, contribute to the failure to protect American workers with market forces. The H-1B is nothing but an elaborate set of rules on a labor market. It never works, ever. Like I say, it subsidizes outsourcers and it delays green cards. But because you also oppose more green cards delivered faster, you enable the people who want the subsidy to say, we're the pro-immigration guys, and they get more guest worker visas instead.
Okay, let's let them respond. Anybody
ahead,
have?
John.
I have some thoughts on that myself.
Well,
too,
actually,
but
I
go
think we just at the end describe how we would reform the green card system, and I know that I've written about this for the Center for Immigration Studies. I think the green card system needs a complete overhaul, and one of the things that, for example, I've written about is suggested that we have clear paths into the United States, where you either come to the United States as an immigrant or a non-immigrant, as it used to be under the original 1952 Act, so that we don't have a system where you come here on a H-1B visa, which has essentially is wide open, and then can get into the higher threshold green card system. Any engineer would tell you that's just opening up to a backlog. That's one of the forms. Second thing I've suggested is we eliminate queuing on the green card system. That the system should make a decision on a green card within some fairly short period of time, based upon some criteria that says, okay, you make your application, here it is. Sorry, these are the limits. We can't give you the green card. Maybe you can apply again in 5 years. Under the current system, we say, oh, we can't have a green card. Get in line and wait for. In the case of India, it's now I think it's to 2004, so that's 13 years. However, on the other hand, the queuing outside of India, China, and the Philippines and Mexico doesn't really exist. The backlog for green cards for any other country is only to September, I believe, right now of this year. So I think it's like a 2 or 3 month wait.
Michelle, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, and so we do outline rather extensively and in detail what we would do, and eliminating the concept of dual intent is important to that. But there's a sort of a larger there's a larger point to your question, which I think is going to come up again and again, particularly when people on the right are arguing among each other about what the proper way is to bring in people who have skills that we want. And among, I think, some of the libertarian advocacy groups is the idea that is the false idea that most of these H-1Bs are among the best and brightest. And we pretty much put to rest that point. There already is an O visa, and I suppose your argument there would be that there again it's not being administered fast enough, or these are not being. Yes, but what I'm saying is for this idea that somehow we need this pipeline now. I still think that my larger point about slowing everything down and processing what we already have is not somehow anathema to the free market. We have a country. Every country is sovereign, and I think that it's fairly clear that the Constitution doesn't provide that we have a country to allow every willing worker in the world for $1.21 to come in. I mean, no country has adopted that kind of policy and long survived.
We can have one brief, quick question, and then we have to go. Yes.
I'm Rachel Saltzfus with the Daily Caller. My question is there really a need for a guest worker program? As long as companies can bring in somebody temporarily, even if there is a shortage, let's say there's a shortage of tech workers, if companies can just bring in outside workers, then how will the market correct itself? How will wages go up?
Well, I would sit there and say, I think that if we did an analysis, a real analysis, what is the need of America for bringing in tech workers for 2 or 3 years and then sending them home at the end? I would wager that probably doesn't exist at all. Right? The only reason we have that, to add another purpose of the H-1B program, is to generate fees for lawyers. We've essentially created the business of immigration lawyer over the past few decades. My guess is that that if we said you can only come here, you have the choice when you make an application. You can either come here for permanent residency or you come for a guest worker program. My guess is there's probably not much need need for tech workers to come here on a temporary basis. And also, we're talking about some of the reforms. Another reform that I had also proposed is eliminating employer-sponsored green visas altogether. In that, if you want to come here as an immigrant, you sponsor yourself. And having a job is a criteria that helps get you higher up on the list. But the immigrant controls his admission, not the employer, and not the employer's immigration lawyer who wants to drag the process out to get as much in fees as possible.
I think that's the key question, really. There is how does employment-based, sort of job-based immigration actually fix the problem? James Taranto from the Wall Street Journal has something he calls the Fox Butterfield effect. Fox Butterfield's reporter, he said once, he wrote a story that said, despite increase in incarceration, crime declines. Well, it's a similar thing here. Employers are bringing in guest workers and then saying, wow, we can't find any people, so we have to have more guest workers in order to tide us over until we can fix the problem of not enough Americans working in these fields. Well, they're actually it's contributing to it. It's a version of that. So that I think gets at the core of this whole idea of employment immigration.
Yeah,
Did anybody have any last few words?
Yeah, and that proposal comes and is co-signed by someone who is a daughter of someone who came here on an employer-sponsored visa, which raises another question too. Somehow, it's hypocritical, or it's throwing other immigrants under the bus for children or grandchildren of immigrants to rethink how our system works. And when my dad came here 45 years ago, it was a much different situation. And so there always should be room to rethink these policies based on the consequences of them, particularly the H-1B program after 25 years. That was another sort of serendipitous piece of timing that the book comes out in the same month that we are marking the 25th anniversary of H-1B. So it's, really heartening to hear not only that Senator Grassley and Senator Durbin are putting forth their proposal, but that also this week we're finally hearing some new noises from two of the presidential candidates who had been wholeheartedly for tripling or even quintupling H-1B visas, both Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. So I think that's a testament to the willingness of workers like Leo Pereiro to come out and speak. The few journalists that are out there that are covering it, that understand it, and hopefully, a hashtag sold out effect as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Hashtag sold out for those on Twitter.
StopOverreach.com.
It's on Amazon, sold out, co-authored by Michelle Malkin and John Miano. Thanks to John and Michelle, and also to Leo for coming up to share his story with us. Thanks all of you for coming, and we'll see you next time.